Good evening, everyone,
Hello,
and,
everyone.
and welcome to Seven Kinds of Mischief. I'm your host, Stone Logie, and with me today is, of course, the Doctor of Disaster and Destruction, Adega Outlaw.
Very good evening. Hello.
Hello, brother. How are you doing tonight?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
Yeah, I've got a surprise for everybody out there listening
Yes.
tonight. We had a conversation with one of the really good storytellers that I've gotten a chance to not only interview but read some of his stuff on here. Some of you may remember this gentleman, R.M. Staniforth. He is the writer behind Journal of a Psychopath, and I have got part 3 of Journal of a Psychopath. So we're going to take a little break. We are going to take a little break from the Viking stuff this week, and we are going to go back to telling spooky, crazy tales about a psychopath.
I'm excited. And I just got a moment ago, Loki and I were talking and got somebody I have been talking with Loki about. Well, you guys know that I was with a publishing company before I got grifted into oblivion. Well, there's some other things. It really doesn't matter. But there was an author there who did horror, and he did it better than anybody I've ever read. And unfortunately, he went down with me as well. And he's going to be doing some indie publishing. He contacted me the other day and wanted to know how I was doing things. And I said, you know what? How would you like to? I got to get approval first. How'd you like to see if we can share some of your stuff with a group on Thursday nights? R.C. Scott, if you ever see him in the reading circles or the writing circles, this guy is nuts, absolutely nuts. So in a month or so, we're going to have him on. And so you've got two really, really good authors that Loki is going to have on doing their spooky stuff. I'm excited.
Hell yes, I'm blown away. I can't believe we're back into horror and spooky tales and talking about the things that we love, and I can't wait. Dave Bob, I still say Adega was wrong. Yes, absolutely.
It's okay. Better things on the horizon.
Always better things on the horizon. What the heck are we talking about tonight, man? Because I know you didn't send me anything, which is really weird. That's a
Yeah,
really
yeah.
weird
Well,
thing.
I had some things in mind, and then you were talking. You were doing your show this morning, and I had made a comment in chat, and I don't think Eris quite got it right, but she was profound in what she said. And I was describing how people become sympathetic over time and actually agree to a lot of the stuff that we are being inundated with, how people become woke, so to speak, how they're deceived. Because it's very hard for a lot of people to understand why people would follow into this reasoning. And she had said, well, no, I just analyze it. I don't have any sympathy for him. There's the key. And that's why she's smart and stays aloof. And that's why the rest of you is the emotional tie. So I was thinking about it because it's been something that I think a lot of us have thought about. Why do these people not understand? And I've brought it up on several different chats before. There is part of the human condition where you have reason and you have primitive brain functions that deal more in survival, and that tends to be closely tied with emotion. And the reason why we don't get through to these people, like you were just on a stream a minute ago, where there was this angry woman yelling and screaming and not making much sense,
Yes.
yet she was full of piss and vinegar.
Yep.
And it's because those emotions tied to certain things will make a person what is it, impervious to logic. So I was thinking about that, and I wanted to get in because I have talked about before certain groups, certain cults. We did a couple of weeks ago when Mike was on. We did. The name slips my mind now. Church of the Prophecy. Um, where these people fall in line, and they'll get into the point to where even with the Mothers of Darkness, where they're going to cannibalize people, and the people that are letting themselves go actually agree with it. It's
Well,
things
look at
that,
that thing that happened with Nixium. Look at that thing that
right,
happened with
right.
Nixium, where
It's
those
the same thing.
woman. Yeah,
Same
yeah.
process. And I want to get into some of those things so you can understand some of the mindset and learn that granted, some of you, I know I'm preaching to the choir, and then some of you know bits and pieces. And so, but the thing is if you can understand their mindset, it gives you a little leg up on trying to help these people. And it's not that a lot of times, not that they're evil, because sometimes they are. Um, Sometimes it's just they're deceived. And you're talking about the Nexium. Why would a woman decide to get her belly branded with a hot iron with some guy's initials? It makes no sense. But somewhere along the line, these intelligent women were brought step by step down to a place where they would lay down and have that happen to them. So let's go over that. There's all kinds of different um, applications for brainwashing. Um, but there are some key things, and I bring this up because I have seen a lot of it. Most of the time, when you see abusive relationships, you know that there is some type of brainwashing going on. So there's several different steps. It won't take long to go through them. If you have questions, um, we'll, I actually will take questions this time. I don't think any of you will, but let's talk about some of these things. And you're going to recognize that you are being bombarded by these every single day, every one of you. And that's the reason why I say, hey, well, why are you buying this name brand? Why do you drink Coke instead of RC? A little bit of brainwashing going on. You think it's just advertising, is it? Really? All right. Number one, isolation. You guys know this one. I think every single one of you know about this. The first tactic to be used in brainwashing is typically to isolate the victim away from their friends and family. Every cult you heard of has done this to one degree or another. Many religions do this too, also. The reason for doing this is so that the victim only has the manipulator to talk to get their information and ideas from. And they do not have to worry about any third party coming in to question what is going on. Uh, the cliques and the colleges, the woke groups, the different aspects of various different groups. You're going to think, you know this. I'm not even going to stick with that. We'll move on. But it does happen with a lot of domestic abuses as well. Here's a big one. Attack one's self-esteem. This one sometimes you don't necessarily see, and then sometimes you do. Now that the victim has been isolated, he or she has to be broken down so that the manipulation can start rebuilding them in the image they desire. Remember last week I told you about the children in the cage next to cats in the cage and how they were treated differently to rebuild them in the way they desired? A person can only be brainwashed if their manipulator is in a superior position to them. These attacks can be in the form of ridiculing or mocking the victim, or intimidation. Again, we go back to that woman we were talking about just a few minutes ago. You are being isolated and attacking your self esteem, trying to anyway, because most people are good people. And when you're being told wrongly that you're a bad person, the average person is going to start self reflecting. Why are they calling me that? Is there any truth to this? You get insulted and defensive, and I keep hearing it over and over again. Isolated in your little group where you're at ist or phobe or this. You see how it works? They're mind controlling you or trying to. Here goes into mental abuse. It's a next step. Another way to manipulate will try and brainwash their victims is by mentally torturing them. They could tell the victim lies. We get that every single day. Turn on the TV. And then embarrassing them with the truth in front of others. Or they could bully their victims by badgering them and not allowing them any personal space. I'll let you guys work on that one. Physical abuse, this one isn't necessarily one that you're going to see on TV, but there are ways like you can isolate people, you can make them put things on their faces, you can mandatorily make things be injected into I didn't say that, did I? Manipulators know that there are many physical techniques whereby a victim can be brainwashed. These include deprivating someone of their sleep, keeping them cold and hungry, actual bodily harm through violent behavior. There are also other more subtle ways that a manipulator can use, such as keeping noise levels up, having lights that flicker on and off all the time, and lowering or raising the temperature in the room. Now, they necessarily can't mess with your thermostat, but lights flickering on and off all the time. How many monitors do you watch during the day? How many of them have advertising for various different things? Don't tell me that isn't working on your subconscious. Repetitive music, this is one that I absolutely loathe because almost all modern music repeats the same phrases over and over and over again. So even if you think you're listening to a different song, it's still the same thing. Studies have shown that if you play a repetitive beat, mostly ideally one that ranges from 45 to 72 beats per minute, think of modern rock, you can induce an extremely hypnotic state. This is because that the repetition is very close to the rhythm of the beat of a human heart. This rhythm can alter your consciousness until you have reached what is known as alpha state, where you are 25 times more suggestible as you would be in beta state. And all the little words that come with all the little music get stuck in your brain, and you slowly become more susceptible to antisocial behaviors. Okay. Only allowing contact with other brainwashed members, safe spaces. By only allowing contact with those who are already brainwashed, the manipulator is creating a situation where the peer pressure comes into play, like all colleges. Everybody wants to be liked and accepted, especially if they are the new member of the group. Adhering and promoting what the other members are saying and doing means that they will be accepted. Us versus them. This is a big one. We all know this. We've had this in politics. They try and say, hey, it's right or left, white or blue. And yet we're all the same. Again, this is all about being accepted into a group, and the best group as well, by saying that there is us and them. The manipulator is immediately offering the victim the chance to choose which group they want to belong to. Their goal is now to achieve absolute obedience and loyalty. And here's one of the big ones: love bombarding. This is a this is a tactic whereby the victim is drawn into a group by physically touching, sharing intimate thoughts, and emotional bonding, all through exercises affecting and constant validation, or affection and constant validation. Gender studies. These are just a few of the ways. I have a few more that are not inside that article. Message association, especially when it comes to commercials, different things. They present a message and associate it with sex or pain or acceptance. Again, if you don't like such a thing, you have to be a misogynist or this or that or the other. Kind of went on with music, but this is another one. Repeat things over and over again. Commercials. You would think a company would, change a commercial. It's not to get the message across by eventually exposing you to it. It's to get the message embedded into your brain. How many of you watched TV as a kid and still can rehearse some of the commercials? Is that just memory, or has it been ingrained in your thought process. 2 all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. I learned that when I was 7 years old, watching cartoons on a Saturday, and it's still there. Curse you, McDonald's. Here's another one, and apparently it's falling apart on them now. It used to work. Messages sent by trusted authorities. You watch public service announcement, or celebrities or politicians get up and say, "You know who I am. This is why things work this way." Or, "You've heard my music. This is why I think this way. Believe it because it comes from me." But why are they any better than anyone else? Why are they smarter than anybody else? Because they pretend on TV? Because they sing in front of a microphone? No. Use your brain. Don't use an image. And I could do a whole hour on subliminal messages, and you guys know that too, but we are constantly bombarded by subliminal messages. The moment you turn on your phone and you see the icons start to flash at you, or Amazon, the little smiley face, Coke has a little curvy line smiling face, McDonald's tells you to smile, they're all messages, subliminal messages. These things make you happy, and if you don't have them, you are not happy. My whole point about this is to be aware of what you're being bombarded with and take the time to shut those out. Read something, talk with somebody, go someplace, and do something where you're not bombarded by it, whether in your eyes, your ears, or any other senses, and get into nature or get into with other people and allow that type of influence to play a counterbalance or a way to open your mind so that it doesn't get locked in, tied up emotionally to a message, to where your emotions override your logic and you no longer hear how stupid you become. All right, that's it for me.
Thank you, brother. I always thought the Adega thing looked like Adega thing. Oh my God. That would have been really bad considering what I was about to say. I always thought the Amazon thing looked like a phallic symbol.
Yeah, you
When you
combine the
look,
two.
yeah, you look at it, especially on the app, you're like, is that what I think it is? It looks like curb. Anyway, look on your app, folks. You'll know what I'm talking about. Amazon app. Yeah.
Well, you look at the Google and you see how the numbers are arranged.
Uh huh.
666 repeating. Yeah, they're all over the place. I showed you guys about a year ago a whole group of different ones from on the Facebook all the way through how they represent various different things.
So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start part 1 of a 3-part series for Journal of a Psychopath. I am going to be rereading high school, college, and then 2 weeks from today, we will be reading part 3, Finding Adeline. I am going to be re-recording these in studio, not live. I'll be re-recording each story and posting them on my YouTube with the approval of RM Staniforth. And I'm going to be looking at his other stories to do the same thing. These will be on my channel. They will be done, voice acted by me, and that'll be like little audiobooks that you can listen to each part of the story. So we're going to be starting with high school. This is my 3rd week at my new high school. I'm used to being the new guy, so it doesn't bother me much. I'm an introvert anyway. I grew up in the foster care system and had never stayed in one place for too long. I wasn't known as a problem child. I just never bonded with any of my foster parents. They could tell. And my lack of attachment always bothered them. They could send me off and hope that their next foster child would give them the happiness they were looking for. The living conditions were usually substandard anyway. Most foster parents need to be needed. So I never took it personally. I never felt like I needed anybody. It's whatever. It was in my junior year anyway, and in just under 2 years, I'd be liberated from the system and on my own. College will be all but free, as they practically beg us foster kids to go to college. Nevertheless, I was 3 weeks into my class at my new school, and I'd already made an enemy, Jake Pearson. In this suburban high school, these idiots were just like the kids at every other school. A bunch of dudes trying way too hard to look cool and tough to the gaggles of girls who were always trying way too hard to stand out by ironically doing the exact same thing that every other girl was doing. These hallways are filled with drama. Drama that, drama this. Look at these $100 shoes Daddy bought me. They're all so drab. The day I arrived, I knew that Jake would be a problem. Jake was somehow the single most cliche high school jock I'd ever seen, including in the movies. He was tall, built, a ladies' man, and had rich parents. The most standout feature about Jake was his incessant need to act overly tough at all times. I was never sure if he was compensating for a tiny ego, or he had just a really large ego. Maybe the true answer was somewhere in between both of those options. Either way, I hated this kid so bad that just the sound of his goddamn voice made me want to move to the next foster home. I was minding my own business one fateful morning when some pathetic nerd had the misfortune of lightly bumping into Jake. Commotion stirred as students all around the hallway gathered to laugh at Jake's beratement of the scrawny nerd. "Did you just push me, Tiny?" he said way too loud, garnering the attention of the other idiots. The terrified, scrawny kid stammered, garbled apologies. I'm sorry, it was just an accident." Before he could finish his stutter, Jake smacked the large stack of books and binders out of the kid's hand. Scattered books and loose papers everywhere. Laughter erupted from the crowd of idiots. Had this kid never even heard of a backpack? I saw my opportunity, and it was time to set things in motion. "I bet you get off by pushing little kids around, don't you?" I spouted out with a laugh. Silence fell immediately. It was almost comical. As Jake turned around, I could see the blood vein popping out of his temple. This kid had anger issues. I don't think Mommy ever told him no. "Who the hell do you think you're talking to, new kid?" "Some idiot," I responded without delay. Jake was really about to lose it now. He pushed me into the locker and put his face so close to my face that I could smell his spearmint gum and nauseating cologne. I had just insulted him in front of his peers. Jake's primal instincts dictated that he had to ensure everyone saw him as the alpha male. Sure, Jake was taller, bigger, stronger, but what he didn't know is that when it comes to fighting, I'm a ragtag, scrappy kid with fast hands. Also, I knew how to take a hit. When I was 8, my foster home taught me how to be tough the hard way. Jake might be a brute, but I knew how to fight smart and dirty. I placed my left foot slightly behind his right heel and slammed my shoulder into his chest as I swiped his foot out from under him. The thud as he hit the floor brought shock to the crowd. To purposely add insult to injury, I chimed in with some commentary. "Looks like your dad isn't the only one who beats you anymore." The statement may not have been true, but either way, the goal was to get in his head. Fighting is as much mental as it is physical. He got up and came bumbling my way, putting all his weight behind a haymaker that I could have seen coming from 2 blocks away. I ducked as his fist flew over my head and landed right in the locker. This was too easy. His back was now turned to me and his body twisted, providing a perfect angle to go on the offensive. I gave him a powerful knee to his side, aimed precisely to give a blow to the kidney. Body shots should always be aimed at major organs. That's what causes the most pain. I was rewarded with a grunt of pain as he dropped to a knee, doubling over on his side. I could have stopped there, but I hated this kid, and I wanted him to hate me. With a quick and easy right hook, I delivered the final blow. His nose made a crunch under my fist, and I fucking loved it. Satisfied, I picked up my backpack and went on my way, leaving Jake laying on the ground with blood all over his face, surrounded by his baffled audience. I went ahead and walked straight to the administrator's office, helping myself to a chair. The lady behind the desk had a nose pointed upwards, displaying her nostrils to anyone and everyone. She reminded me of a pig. "Can I help you?" Mrs. Pig asked, with a high-pitched tone that stank of fake kindness. "The principal is going to want to see me here in a minute," I told her, with my legs crossed and hands behind my head. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. I don't understand why this lady feels the need to speak with such a high pitch. It reminds me of nails on a chalkboard. No, I stumbled across a bullying incident, and long story short, I broke someone's nose. The amusing look on her face was somewhere between confused and shocked. "I'll be right back," Mrs. Piggy said slowly as she got out of her chair. She disappeared into the back hallway and came out a couple minutes later, being trailed by a tall, trim man wearing a worn gray suit that was almost as old-fashioned as his ridiculous bushy gray mustache. In remarkably good timing, the glorified hall monitor, who was officially called hallway security, came walking in holding the arm of Jake. To my pleasure, Jake was gingerly holding a large wad of blood-soaked paper towels over his nose. There were several drops on his beloved Letterman's jacket. I hoped it stained. Behind Jake and Mr. Hallway Monitor was the stuttering little kid who had nearly become Jake's chew toy that morning. I had almost forgotten about him. Stutters shot me a grateful look, but he still remained panicked and terrified. He reminded me of a wide-eyed chihuahua who had just been beaten too many times. It was pathetic. The remaining process took several hours. First, the principal, Mr. Hall Monitor, interviewed me while Jake was working on getting his profusely bleeding nose under control. Afterward, they interviewed Stutters, who backed up my story. Lastly, they interviewed Jake, who naturally claimed that I sucker punched him. After that, I was forced to call my foster parent, Dean, and now he sat beside me as the principal explained my suspension. Dean wasn't having any of that, though. Luckily for me, he's a lawyer. Not a big-time fancy corporate lawyer. He was a public defender for the city. Still, his skills would prove useful. His arrival marked the beginning of a long argument in which Dean laid out the legality of self-defense and ranted about anti-bullying. The school administration refused to show any documentation concerning previous complaints with Jake and his bullying, which likely meant that it did indeed exist, and the school needed to cover up their inaction. After Dean threatened to file a lawsuit and go public, the principal actually backed down. I was surprised. I never had a foster parent go to bat for me. Maybe Dean would prove useful after all. Of course, he really didn't do it for me. Dean was nice enough, but I could see that he was only on board with the foster parent thing to appease his wife. I'm assuming that they tried for years to have a child of their own, but for whatever medical reasons, they were unable. Why or how they ended up with a teenage foster child was beyond me. Sarah was the single most generous foster parent I've ever had. She had a pathetic need to be loved and needed. I don't share this need, but frankly, my current foster situation is pretty good, and I like this part of town that they live in. It's off toward the end of the suburban part of the city, and the woods were nearby. The woods provided me with plenty of quiet places to visit. For this reason, I would play into Sarah's needs for as long as necessary. It was too easy to turn on the grateful orphan persona and allow Sarah to feel needed. In return, I'd be provided with a cushy of a life as a foster kid could get. Dean and I were now alone in the parking lot. As he reached to open his car door, he stopped and looked at me. "Listen, Rich." Oh God, here comes the emotional talk about how he understands what I'm going through and how it's a tough time, yada, yada, yada. Just want to let you know that I'm impressed with what you did. standing up for a kid that was being bullied. So, let's just not tell Sarah about this, okay? Sounds good. Thanks, Dean. He looked like he was about to give me an awkward hug, but thankfully he settled on a slightly less awkward fist bump. Apparently, he was touched by my bold display of anti-bullying, saving stutters for the time being. Honestly, my actions had nothing to do with defending that spineless little shrimp. I don't give two shits about him. I did it because I hated Jake. And stutters gave me the golden opportunity that I couldn't waste. The rest of the day was dismal and ordinary. Classes were easy for me. I didn't do most of my homework but managed B's and sometimes A's simply by getting good scores on tests. My motivation depended on the class. Math was easy but boring. My reading teacher was a true moron who loved overanalyzing worthless poetry. But my psychology class was actually interesting and useful. At this point, I had already read the entire psych textbook and continued to research on my own. It was helping me to understand more about myself. I'd been reading about personality disorders, and I saw a lot of myself in the section about psychopathy and antisocial behavior. At this point, I wondered if I myself was a psychopath. It didn't bother me one bit. It just made sense. It was like all the pieces finally fitting in a puzzle. Psychopathy is characterized by many things, including an inability to feel empathy. This is where I felt uncertain. There was one person, only one, who I've ever truly felt empathy for, Addie. Addie was once my foster sister. But we've been separated when I was 8. I'm not sure if I have the inability to feel empathy for another, or I simply learned not to after losing Addie. As I was walking home, only a 25-minute walk, I turned down the back road right next to the woods. Houses were scarce on the road, nice, quiet, out of sight. About 10 minutes into my walk, I realized I was being followed by a maroon Mustang convertible. The car pulled up and out clambered Jake and 3 of his minions, a group of idiots who followed Jake, like little neglected puppy dogs hoping to get a compliment and some positive attention from their master. I can fight, sure, but I'm not stupid either. I was outnumbered 4-1, so I turned and ran for the woodline. I'll admit these kids were fast. I quickly realized that I wouldn't be able to outrun them for too long, so I said to hell with it, I'm more about fight than flight anyway. I ducked behind some thick brush and grabbed a hefty but manageable stick. If I'm going to go down, I'm going down swinging. The footsteps were arriving quickly, so I swung my stick right as victim number 1 came around the corner. Stick connected so hard with his blocky head that it broke in half. Unfortunately, the stick was useless now, but the damage had been done and victim number 1 hit the ground hard. I gave victim number 2 a hard front kick straight to the chest. He grunted as the air escaped his lungs and he landed on his back with his feet in the air. King Leonidas would be proud. Ow! I dodged the 3rd guy, a far but strong kid who only knew how to bull rush. That's when a hard rock connected with my temple. I was on the ground now and didn't recall how I had fallen. I was getting kicked repeatedly. A blow to my gut knocked the wind out of me, but I grabbed his foot and pulled. Pulling all my weight into his knee, whoever that knee belonged to shouted in pain. Probably just hyperextended it. The rock hit me again, this time in my nose. I was dazed now, but I could see Jake standing over me with a decent-sized stone. All right, let's stop this before it gets too out of hand, someone said. I think that was victim number 2. Shut the hell up, Brian, Jake snapped back. I'm not done. Another 2 kicks hit me hard in the ribs. Okay, seriously, Jake, I think that's enough. Quit being a pussy. Another 2 kicks found their home in my stomach as I struggled to get air in my lungs. Kick him, Brian, Jake ordered. Come on, man, he's already almost unconscious. I said kick him, Jake ordered again, looking threatened with the rock still in his hand. Bet you like being his little bitch, don't you, Brian? That sentence flew out of my mouth before I could stop it. I always knew what to say if I wanted to hurt someone. That statement was the last push Brian needed, and his shoe connected hard with my head. My vision was now covered with black dots. Through my very blurry vision, I saw Jake lean down. You're messing with the wrong person, Rich. You'd best find yourself a new foster home before I make your life so miserable you want to kill yourself. Not that anybody would give a shit. He stood up, gave me one last kick, and then ordered his brainless minions to go back to the car. I watched them leave, one kid heavily limping, victim number one, just as dazed as I was. At least I did some damage. Despite the pain in my head and ribs, I laughed. Jake may have won the battle, but I knew that I would win the war. I knew I'd have the last laugh. Jake had no idea what I was capable of. My limits are beyond the sky. I always win. Sometime later, I made it home. As I walked through the door trying to act natural, it was immediately apparent how haggard I must have looked. Sarah gasped and rushed in to guide me to the couch, demanding to know what had happened. There was no way to hide this now. I might as well tell her the truth. Dean would understand. Sarah called Dean, who dutifully came straight home to support his distraught wife. Sarah was choking back tears, and as she explained to Dean how I'd been jumped, she threatened to call the police and take me to the hospital, to which I objected. I did not need the police to get involved in my war with Jake. If the system finds out about this, they might make me move to a new home. I don't want to move again. I pled to Sarah, playing in her emotional state. I think she's right. I think he's right, Sarah, Dean chimed in. These boys can feel like they're even now, so there's no need to take any unnecessary risk. You know how the system is. Dean had come in clutch again. This guy was proving himself more useful every moment. Sarah nodded in reluctant agreement. It was just too easy to get her to change her mind. But you're not going to school tomorrow, she demanded. You're going to stay home so I can take care of you and make sure you're okay. I reminded myself of how I need to play into Sarah's need to be needed, so I agreed. For good measure, I gently touched her hand and told her thank you. She allowed a tear to escape after that move. Something was wrong with her. I could see it in her eyes. At some point, she'd had some traumatic experience that hurt her deeply. I woke up late Friday morning to Sarah bringing in fresh breakfast, eggs, bacon, pancakes. My ribs twinged with pain as I sat up and my head pounded. Sarah was on top of that too, though, offering me 800 milligrams of ibuprofen to be down with some orange juice and a cup of fresh coffee. This treatment was another display that I was not used to. Never had anybody brought me breakfast in bed. After assuring Sarah that the breakfast was wonderful, I told her I was going to rest. After she left, I pulled out the computer that I had purchased with the money I stole from my last foster parents. I was pretty good with computers. They were useful and underrated tools that most teens just use to stir drama or look up porn. People are so oblivious to how exposed their personal information is. It took me less than 2 hours to know everything about Jake and Brian that I needed to know. I had his address, his phone number, and learned the fact that the family was on a trip to their lake house for the weekend, about a 5-hour drive away. Probably his parents' attempt to draw attention away from his school suspension. Rich people in the suburbs are all about image. That night, after Sarah and Dean were long asleep, I quietly got ready. The house had a security system that monitored and logged every time a door or window opened or shut. Probably did it because they knew I was moving in. It wasn't a problem, though. I easily detached the device without breaking the magnetic seal. Actually, it was perfect. Security system logs would provide me with a good alibi, should things go wrong. I exited the house through the window and stepped off on the pre-planned route that would most likely take me through the wooded area and out of sight. I enjoyed the woods at night. It's so quiet and peaceful. It took me about 30 minutes to arrive at my destination. Jake's house was huge and sat on a lot that must have been an acre or more. I searched through the property near the back door, expecting to find a spare key. They weren't dumb enough to keep the key under the doormat, but they didn't hide it very well either. The rock looked convincing at first, but when I looked at it up close, I could tell it was fake. I carefully lifted the rock and found a little compartment underneath containing a key. Just like that, I had gained access to their house. Although their house was large and immaculate, it didn't take me long to find the room I was looking for. Jake had a life-size football poster of himself on his door. His room was huge, the size of a small apartment. I carefully searched for anything that would be of use. On his shelf designated for keepsakes, I found an old but expensive-looking sheathed knife. The knife had someone's initials engraved in it, signaling that it might be a family heirloom of sorts. I picked it up with my gloved hand and pocketed it. Jake didn't seem too worried about his parents snooping through his stuff. His computer wasn't even password protected. Thank you, Jake. Thanks to his carelessness, I now had access to all of his personal information, including social media and his chat messages that were backed up to the cloud. This was the gold mine, where I would get all the information that I needed. I sat down and I went to work. You can learn a lot about someone's life by going through their text messages and photos. I found out that Jake and his friends had a certain spot in the woods where they would meet up to drink alcohol and smoke pot. Thanks to the photos being geotagged, I now knew exactly where that spot was. More importantly, I learned that Jake had pestered just about every girl in school for nudes. They rejected him. He then pressured and insulted the girls. When I came across his conversations with Brian, I found my lucky break. Jake had tested his luck with a girl Brian was dating. When she refused his request, Jake called her a whore. After Brian had found out, he finally stood up for himself, and the messages show that they had quite an argument. They were not currently on speaking terms, and Jake made it clear that he would not speak to Brian and would ruin his popularity. Oh, this was perfect. I now had a perfect plan. I saw that Jake and his family would be home Sunday afternoon. Brian's status showed currently active, so I sent him a message through Jake's social media, asking him to meet me at the spot Sunday night at midnight. After Brian replied with one letter, K, I deleted the messages so Jake would not see them on his end. On my way out, I stole a hoodie, some pants, and an extra pair of gym shorts. I made sure to grab stuff from the back of the shelves to ensure their absence would not be noticed. I took one last look around to feel secure that I had no noticeable trace. After locking the door and carefully putting the key back where I'd found it, I went back home the same way I'd came, undetected. Saturday and Sunday, I continued to allow Sarah to look after me. Made her feel good, and I needed her to think that I needed her, so I could continue living. Finally, Sunday night arrived. I put on the clothes that I stole from Jake and headed on my way. I waited in the shadows for Brian to arrive, and at about 12:05 a.m., I heard the footsteps approaching. What do you want, Jake? Brian started as he entered the small clearing. We have school tomorrow. Before he could finish, I hit him hard in the face with a rock. Jake's signature move. Brian fell to the ground, putting his hands on his face as if that would somehow dull the pain. I didn't care. I kicked him in his head and his gut, over and over and over. I watched with pleasure as he rolled around in agony, betrayed and incapacitated. What the hell, Jake? Oh, I'm not Jake, I told him coldly. Brian squinted up at the sound of my voice, shocked. He stammered a few disconnected words, trying to catch his breath through the pain. I kneeled beside him. What do you want? Brian finally managed to muster between heavy breaths. Revenge. Looking Brian straight in the eye, I plunged Jake's knife straight into Brian's torso, stabbing right into his liver. I was rewarded with an agonizing groan from Brian. And to get rid of Jake. Another stab, this time off to the side, making sure I got his kidney. This really isn't about you, Brian. Another stab, another moan. You're just on the wrong side of this war, and a convenient means to an end here. Drawing in the delectable thrill of the moment, I thrust the knife deeper and listened to Brian's agonizing moans and shortening breath. I stared into his eyes so I could see the look on his face as he realized he was about to die. And you really shouldn't have kicked me. I gave him another hard stab, this one I placed just under his left pec. The blade slid right between his ribs, piercing his heart. I pulled out the knife, his blood sputtered out of the wound like a fountain. Then I sat back and admired my handiwork. Brian's breaths gurgled and rasped into the silent woods. I realized the attack looked way too clean. Everything was too precise. I needed this to look like a stupid brute had lost his temper. I gave a dozen or so more widely placed stabbing wounds raging in depth that looked a lot better. In less than a minute, the groans and the breathing stopped. Brian just laid there, covered in blood. I dragged his body and hid it in the thick brush, where I covered him in branches and leaves. I took my time to make sure that it looked sloppy and hasty. I had the knife about 100 feet away, knowing full well that the police would scour the area and find it. I took off the hoodie, sweatpants, and shoes, deposited them in a park garbage bin that was just a yard off the woodline, about a half a mile away from the scene. I'd worn long layers underneath Jake's clothes and made care to never touch his clothes with my skin. I never wore a swimming cap to make sure my hair didn't get anywhere. The only evidence left that could tie me to the crime was the pair of latex gloves that I'd worn to avoid getting fingerprints on the knife or blood under my fingernails. I made it back home with the same stealth I'd used the previous night. I quietly went into the bathroom where I soaked the latex gloves in bleach, scrubbing away until they were spotless. After flushing the toilet to make sure Dean and Sarah would believe I was just taking a bathroom break, I used a little more bleach to vigorously wash my hands and then topped off the bottle with some water, so it wouldn't seem like it had been used. Finally, it was bedtime, and I was exhausted. Murder is hard work. It seemed like only a couple minutes later when my alarm went off. I hurried to the bathroom and took one more hard look to make sure the gloves and cleaning supplies were in the proper places. I then took a scorching hot shower, scrubbing every part of my body with rigor, just in case. I then relaxed and used the rest of the time to reflect on the kill. Sarah insisted on taking me to school, seeing as I had been jumped last week. In my reflection, I found it interesting that I felt enjoyment out of the kill this time. I didn't recall the same satisfaction from my first. Maybe that's because that was the day I lost Addie. I was 8 years old. Finally understood what my alcoholic foster father was doing and was going into my sister's room and locked the door. Addie was only 6. One night when he was drunk, I put his revolver in his mouth and pulled the trigger. The police ruled it as a suicide. I hadn't seen Addie since, but we were sent to new homes that day. She was the one and only person I ever remembered feeling love for. School started the same, business as usual. By the second period, the Gossip News Network was buzzing with the news that Brian's parents had reported him missing. By lunch, it was common knowledge. The best part happened just as school was getting out. I could see and hear the commotion from down the hall. I walked over, peering over the crowd of idiots, all trying to get a good video on their flip phones. 3 police were forcing out a handcuffed and panicked Jake. He protested and resisted, but the police overpowered him and forced him into the car. By the 6 o'clock local news, it was a headline story. Jacob Pearson, high school athlete, charged with murder of a classmate, Brian Jones. I had a hard time holding back my satisfactory smile, but Dean and Sarah were in the room. I already had Sarah wrapped around my finger, but for good measure, I told her that Jake was the kid that attacked me. I put on my best scared orphan face during the newscast. That could have been me who got killed, I told her, forcing myself to sound scared. Her heart melted and I received instant sympathy as she pulled me into a tearful hug. Dean, being a public defender, was in the know. He, also believing I was scared, offered me some comfort. It'll be tough to defend him, he assured me. Jake will be going away for a long time. I mean, the prosecutors have everything: the body, the weapon, fingerprints, even motive. It's like someone handed the AG this case on a silver platter. Indeed, I had. It was the next day that Sarah and Dean sat me down and told me they wanted to push forward with adopting me. I had gained their trust and, more importantly, their sympathy. I'd now be able to live in this cushy home with pushover parents until college. Even then, they'd probably send me money and give me a place to stay in the summer. They were good-natured idiots, but useful good-natured idiots. What a success my first month in my new home had been. I locked in my preferred living situation. I got rid of the only problem in my neighborhood, Jake. And the best part, Jake hung himself to death in jail before the trial even started. The police called it good, certain that Jake was their man, and the case was closed. I still laugh when I think back to when Jake told me he'd make me want to kill myself. Like I told him that day, I always win. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Journal of a Psychopath Part 1, High School.
Oh, can't wait. Oh, gosh, it
So-
reminds me how good that was. And you know what? You were born to read horror stories.
Thank you. Killer, psycho killer, psycho killer.
Inflectuations, everything. Born for this, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to have part 2 next week. It will be Journal of a Psychopath College. And then the week after that, we will have the new story, Journal of a Psychopath, Finding Adeline, which of course is talking about finding his long lost sister.
Awesome.
So thank you guys so very much for being here. Thank you, Adega. Adega, the first part of this was absolutely wonderful. And I love getting to do these with you each and every Thursday, brother. I really do.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely. Awesome.
So I will be.
I only showed you a few, but yeah, I have plenty of steampunk glasses.
Yes.
You probably didn't see it while you were reading.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. What did I miss? I'm gonna have to go back and watch.
Yeah, he had just made a comment that he saw this avatar and said, "Oh, we need to get you some steampunk glasses." Little did he know.
Yes, Adega has the steampunk glasses. Adega definitely has the steampunk glasses. So, guys, I'm gonna be putting these stories up on the channel. I'm gonna have a special place for them. All of RM Stanapor stuff that he lets me do. They are written by him. This is all his work. I just get to play the bad guy. I get to play the villain. Yes, I love getting to play the villain. It's so much fun.
Loki did it.
A real villain. Oh, guys, thank you for being here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here on Thursdays with me and Adega. I don't feel like I've had a good week unless I do get to do this show. It's always so great. It really is.
These are a blast.
Yes. All right. You got anything for us before we get out of here?
Me, no, just my regular rigmarole. I'll be posting another chapter of my current work on my page on Sunday. It depends. Sometimes I do stuff with Vinny. He's the comic book artist that one of these days we'll get him to show up. But he's quite accomplished. I had mentioned it to you before. His art was so good that Stan Lee was purchasing stuff from him.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then doing Babylon 5 reviews with Fat Steven on Mondays. So
Yeah. Yeah. Guys, if someone can please throw in Adega's link for Adega's YouTube channel. Adega has so many stories over on his channel. He does so much great work.
I'm going to be pulling down the last of the evolution stuff. Echoes of Nor is going to be coming down soon. I've almost
Okay.
finished editing it. So, but yeah, there's still stuff there.
Heck yeah. Guys, subscribe to Adega Outlaw. We will see you next week. Thank you so very much. Be excellent to each other. Always speak friend to enter. And we will see you guys next week.
Night.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.